I want to begin with a couple of interesting numbers to talk about how we might think about Nebraska's economy. We really are thinking about taxes, state taxes, and we ask the question among the senators, are we spending too much? Are we spending it efficiently and on the right things? And then I got to think, how does that compare with energy in the state of Nebraska? And I looked up some of the numbers. 2010 is the latest I was able to get a hold of. Turns out the state legislature appropriates just under $4 billion a year in taxes from various sources. $4 billion a year. What Nebraska businesses, homeowners, residents pay for energy is twice that amount, $8 billion. If we would start asking the same questions about energy expenditures as we do about taxes, are we spending too much, are we spending it efficiently, we might actually do the citizens and businesses of the state of Nebraska a better service by wrestling with energy issues compared to worrying about taxes. But imagine what kind of a bonus we would give to the state citizens' homes and so forth if we were to really focus the same level of intensity on what we spend for energy. That's number one. Number two, a little bit of a fact, Nebraska is number 8 in energy intensity. There's about 461 million BTUs per person in the state of energy. That doesn't mean a lot. But the national average is down to closer to 320 million. So 400 plus compared to 320. Very energy intensive state. And electricity, even as much so, we spend about 25% to 30% more on electricity per dollar of economic activity in Nebraska than the U.S. as a whole does. So there are some huge opportunities that clearly have positive benefits if we think about how to redirect smart investment, smart effort, what I sometimes call purposeful effort, into a more productive and a clean energy economy, certainly in this case led by wind resources, for which Nebraska has quite an opportunity. And rather than just take things on assumption, and I think that's part of the message here, asking better questions, digging down a little bit deeper into what the assumptions are, what the realities might be if we redirect our effort in new ways. In that same spirit, I want to tell a little bit of a story about the Raspberry Pi. I'm holding a picture of my hand here. Anybody hear of the Raspberry Pi? Okay. United Kingdom, University of Cambridge, noticed they were getting a lot of PhD applicants for computer science programs who had never mucked with a computer, who had never gotten their hands on a computer, never really played with the parts and tried to rewire or mix-match microchips and the like. And they wondered why that would be. Because we know as human beings that we're really at our most creative when we have both our mind and our hands that work together, that kind of interaction. They noticed that, well, maybe the computers are just too expensive. So they use software engineering, but they wanted to encourage more hands-on stuff. Hence the Raspberry Pi, with a number of people in the UK, just a little bit over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, something like that. They got together with a computer that's credit card size. I'm going to pass it around on my cell phone, my own personal image holding in my hand of the Raspberry Pi. It is a credit card size computer, every bit as powerful as your laptop. I got from Amazon for $50. Now imagine what that could do to revolutionize possibilities of technologies, both on the efficiency end of things and on wind. And the reason that's important because now we're beginning to see microelectronics coming into technologies in ways that we've never imagined before, bringing down the costs of these technologies and increasing the reliability and their capability of interacting on the grid in smarter and more productive ways. The Raspberry Pi. But even then, I want to talk about now the fluke of a whale, because that's coming into the picture as well in some surprising ways. It turns out, as you can imagine, the whale has a very efficient body for sliding through the water, and scientists have noted that the fluke, that tail end there, particularly had a unique design in very small ways that we might not appreciate if we see pictures from afar. But they took images of it and determined that it was actually quite the smart fluid airfoil, if you will. And they're now using images like that to redesign how blades on wind turbines can slice through the air at even greater efficiencies with less requirement to do so. So in that sense, we're learning new ways by bringing in new images, pulling together new ways of thinking about opportunities. So together with the Raspberry Pi and the fluke of the whale, we begin to see how these all might merge into some interesting opportunities for efficiencies in wind power systems for the state of Nebraska. Nebraska, as you already undoubtedly know, number 4 in, I think somebody says even higher, maybe third, I don't know, but number has the fourth best wind regime in the country, and one of the most underutilized wind regimes in the country at this point now, compared to, say, states like Iowa and elsewhere. So a huge opportunity to pick up. And the costs are coming down. Even can't acknowledge the costs are coming down pretty dramatically. Still some uncertainties about things like reliability, long-lived nature of the systems, but those are being worked out to the point where Colorado Energy, just a year and a half ago, set a record for something like 56% of all electricity on a single day being delivered by wind electricity. Imagine 56%. So it's not the bulky resource we used to think it is, not the intermittent resources we might think it is, particularly if we have resources spread around the state so that we can be capturing the dynamic of more of them. Some off, some on, different times, but mixing and matching, and with greater software packages to manage those resources, it's becoming increasingly reliable, especially when linked with greater levels of energy efficiency that can lower the demand in ways that provides wind with a bigger opportunity to deliver its electricity. So that's the story in a nutshell, although as I remember a professor of mine said, anything that could be said in a nutshell probably belongs to one, except in this case, right? So, yeah, thank you very much. On to the study a little bit. What we found is two things. One is that Nebraska is spending a lot of money on electricity and energy. But secondly, it turns out that by smartly deflecting money away from electricity into other sectors of the economy, we create more jobs. And the reason for that is that our electric utilities in Nebraska don't support that many jobs per $1 million of revenue compared to other activities in the state. So directly and indirectly, as we like to say, pay $1 million, you've got people that are working the power plants, administering the utility operations and things like that. And then you've got the supply chain that feed resources, time, energy into the utilities. Directly and indirectly, it's about 7 jobs per $1 million of activity, or per $1 million of revenue that they receive. On average, the Nebraska economy is about 11 jobs per $1 million. So to the extent we save money for consumers, we move money away from 7 jobs now to 11 jobs. For every $1 million we can divert, we are putting more people to work, about 4 jobs, the difference between those two numbers, basically. It's a little bit more complicated than that, because there's some future productivity gains that have to be considered, how prices change, and things like that. But that gives you the flavor. It turns out almost anywhere in the country, energy purchases are not at all labor intensive. They're capital intensive, but not labor intensive. So if we can smartly redeploy those resources into other sectors, whether it's smart investment or saving money for consumers and businesses, and allow that spending to go on other things in the economy, you're bound to increase by at least some small amount the number of jobs. What we found in the state of Nebraska, looking out over the time horizon through 2030, we're starting roughly last year, we did the study 18 years out to 2030. Yes, it's going to take some investment. That investment will have to be supported by program costs. In other words, it takes effort to plan, to train, and to monitor, and to evaluate how the investment is actually moving throughout the economy. But then as that begins to mount, the savings kick in. Both wind and energy efficiency together will generate, on average, about $225 million a year in net electricity savings for the state as a whole. A little bit of an initial loss in the first year as you're ramping up, so you're laying out more investment and able to really recover through cost savings. But that's just in the first 2 years, maybe 3 years. But it's a small difference, so the question is, how do we manage to sell that to people that, yeah, you may take a little bit of a hit in the first year, but in the 3rd year, 4th year, you're starting to really see savings. But even in the first year, jobs go positive. You're putting people to work because you're creating investment. Construction is one of the more labor-intensive areas and one of the more wage-smart kind of areas to put money. So you're putting people to work right away, even as you pull a little bit back on your electricity savings, but it kicks in. So $225 million on average over the period through 2030. But the other interesting part is we took a look, as I think Ken said, health impacts. And by reducing emissions from the various power plants throughout the state, there is a savings on the order of another $200 million of avoided healthcare costs. These are avoided things like upper respiratory diseases, even some heart attacks in some cases and things like that. And that's just in Nebraska. Elsewhere, because pollutants know no state boundaries. It has a positive impact in other parts of the country as well. So it's a good story on all levels. And really fundamentally what it comes down to is a management issue. How to manage resources so that you can redirect your investment in ways that, yes, provide the construction, provide the activity initially, but then slowly build out so that the savings kick in both from the wind resources compared to electricity, normal electricity